Hello, my name is Minjae Kim. I am an undergraduate student at the Johns Hopkins University Department of Biomedical Engineering. Today, I would like to present our work on minimizing the leak of viral COVID-19 particles from CPAP masks. COVID-19, or SARS-CoV-2, is a deadly respiratory disease first introduced in December 2019 in Wuhan, China. And since then, it has become a global pandemic, with rising the death toll globally about 8,800,000 and about 189,000 in the US only by September 7th of 2020. Well, while most of the cases are asymptomatic, the medium to severe symptoms of COVID include acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS, respiratory failure, and some secondary complications including hypertension and pneumothorax. However, current treatments preliminarily rely on respiratory relief, including mechanical ventilation or use of some bronchodilator through inhalation and nebulation. While mechanical ventilation is one of the most rarely used respiratory relief with patients with ARDS, the ventilation itself requires a highly invasive procedure called the endotracheal intubation, as shown in the figure to the left. But not only this process significantly increases the risk of release of viral particles and during the intubation, but may cause some tracheal scarring or even inflammation and infection um, within the trachea. So, as an alternative method, there is a non-invasive measure called the NIV, the non-invasive ventilation, with many subtypes as noted in figures below, the mask format or the helmet format. However, one NIV called a CPAP, which stands for continuous positive airway pressure, can be potentially be used for COVID-19 patients. Similar to the mechanical ventilator, it provides a positive airway into the lung to support the lung structure and therefore assist in patient respiration. However, CPAP mask itself is prone to be quite leaky under air pressure directed from the CPAP machine, and leaky viral particles from the patient's respiratory tract may be released in the vicinity of the patients, and then may cause some high risk for infection for clinicians or other visitors. This is the main reason why CPAP has been deterred so much to be used in COVID-19 therapy. So, if we could solve this leakage problem, then there is a significant opportunity to adopt the NIV CPAP as part of the routine COVID-19 therapy. In order to solve this problem, we need to approach it in two ways. First is how can you first localize the precise location where the leak is occurring across the surface of the mask? And this question actually boils down to into two parts. Is that first is that how can you simulate or model the mechanism of the aerosol release from the lung or the respiratory tract of COVID-19 patients? And second is that even though we successfully model this mechanism, how can you then visualize such a small particle as aerosol, which is quite minute and sometimes quite transparent, to be visualized in naked eye? Oh, and then our second problem is the main objective of this study is that how can we then indeed prevent the leak from the CPAP mask? And we'll introduce a novel method of using a memory foam in subsequent slides. To answer the question on how we can model and simulate the mechanism of aerosol release, we propose experimental apparatus called the endotracheal aerosolizer configuration. Here we have a traditional CPR dummy. First, we attach the aerosolizer, or in this case, can be a nebulizer or fogger, directly to the endotracheal tract, and then clamping any segue that divert the flow of aerosol other than that directing to the mouth. So in this case, we clamp the tubing between the lung of the CPR dummy and the tract, noted in the gray color. As you can see, the blue arrows denote the direction of the aerosol flow from the aerosolizer to the tract and to the mouth of the dummy. On a separate note, we introduce a CPAP with the CPAP mask on top of the face, just like it would be used in a clinical setting. So the positive airflow denotes is noted as a red arrow. Notice that the direction of the blue and the red arrow is the opposite, so there will be some sort of a tug of war phenomenon going on between them. So during this conflict of this inward flux of the CPAP mask or CPAP machine and the outward flux of the aerosol, we see some spill out of the aerosol in blue arrows, which are then denoted in yellow rings. This is a surrogate measure, which is a representation of COVID-19 aerosol leakage that we are trying to model. To answer the second question on how we can visualize this minute aerosol particles, is that we propose a method that uses a light occlusion by lining a series of LED lighting underneath the periphery of the mask, shown in the figure to the left. And as you can see from the video, to answer the question on how we can then prevent the leaks, we then impose two solutions. First is lining the mask with the memory foam pad on top of the standard silicone surface of the mask, so that once patient wears this mask, the foam will then mold around and fit around the facial contour of the patient's face, thus maximizing the mask to face contact. The second point is that we noticed that the substantial amount of aerosol leakage occurs at the exhaustion port of the CPAP mask. So we directed and covered this exhaustion port with the HEMA viral particle filter to relieve the exhausting air exiting the mask free of aerosols. Using our proposed experimental setups, we first confirmed that the majority of the aerosol leakage is actually localized in first the exhaustion ports on top of the mask, and the second the contact surface between the mask and the face. To kind of compare the performance of leakage between the control mask, so without any memory foam, and our prototype mask with the memory foam, the CPAP mask without the memory foam attachment showed significantly more leakage around the chin area on the CPR dummy, which I will show in the next slide. Here, this is the comparison figure. The figure to the right, it shows the modified CPAP mask with the memory foam attachment. And then we see no visible leak that is originating from the chin area between the CPAP mask and the face. But however, the figure to the left shows a normal control CPAP mask without the memory foam attachment, and then we do see some this leakage that is circled in the red oval. To summarize, from our preliminary study here, we first determined that the memory foam may serve as a preliminary means to minimize and reduce aerosol leaks from CPAP masks. Our study provides an important first insight on how we can approach and adopt a pre-existing NIV CPAP therapy in providing better respiratory care for COVID-19 patients. However, one point to note that is that all our data collection was qualitative, which means that our results were strictly based on observation. And the future step would entail collecting more quantitative detection of the leak, maybe in units of milliliters or per second. Second point to note is that we would need to modify our respiratory aerosol mechanism stimulation to be more physiologically relevant in human respiration. So far, our model represents only just a one-way flow of aerosol from the inside of the respiratory tract to the outside toward the mouth. That being said, we will need to account for the exhalation and the inhalation mechanism of patient breathing, or human breathing, which is essentially a rhythmic change in positive or negative flux of aerosol, and a subsequent respiratory rate, which is represented as a rate of change in the flux direction of the aerosol particles. We can then selectively view not only the presence of the aerosol leaking, but also the relative flow on how fast the leakage is happening.